Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will tell you it's great to be here today. I had the opportunity to attend General Hyten, for those that recognized him in the video, held a commander's conference in Colorado Springs over the past 2 days. And it was a little sporty, I might say, being able to get down here last night. For those that don't know, we had a little bit of snow in Colorado, upwards of 18 inches up in Boulder, and as it made its way down, they closed DIA, and so we were scrambling to get down here between that and the thunderstorms last night. It made for an interesting journey, but so as I say, it's great to be with you here this morning. I really do appreciate the invitation to be here. Mike, thank you for the kind introduction. General Woods, sir, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And as well, a shout out to Katie Hellwig. Really appreciate the invitation to be here, and looking forward to sharing a few moments with you to describe not only what our Air Force space budget looks like in FY17, but to kind of set the strategic landscape a little bit with regard to some of the initiatives, key programs, and kind of a little bit of the rationale of what we're doing and why we're doing it. First, as you look at our space environment, I think it's important to place it in the strategic context and foundationally understand from the get-go, as it is in cyber, and as the world has certainly witnessed to, our space domain is critically important, and our nation is critically dependent upon space-enabled capabilities. Everything we do, whether it's a pizza delivery, everything to GPS, or farming, or banking, and precision timing, communication, our nation is critically dependent upon our space capabilities, as are our joint warfighters. And so every military operation conducted around the world is enabled by space, as well as cyber operations. And so it's important that we understand and acknowledge that, that tie that through both domains, as well as the integration with our air, land, and sea domains, that we are able to create those synergistic effects on not only on the battlefield, but also to sustain our daily lives. Unfortunately, we are witness to a rapidly changing environment. There is a rising threat environment that has certainly made national and world headlines, and an evolved threat that is changing our calculus and changing the way we have to think about space as a domain, space as an operational environment. It is no longer a sanctuary. For decades, the space environment, we knew who our neighbors were, we could understand norms of behavior, there were expectations, and frankly, it was a domain that really hadn't been contested or congested. Certainly you're seeing a number of space players enter the regime, but beyond that, there's a number of increasing hostile actions that cause great concern, especially when you consider the significant amount of national treasure that we have on orbit, again, preparing, delivering, and sustaining our way of life. And so in recognition with those evolving threats in this changing landscape, we've got to figure out a way to assure our operations not only today, but in the future. And so we're looking through multiple methods and multiple means to make sure that, in fact, we make sure that we preserve our capabilities, as well as field improvements to our security posture through not only resilience, as well as disaggregation and the new capabilities that would be presented through new systems architectures, as well as through experimentation and prototyping and development of new tactics, techniques, and procedures. With all respect to General Vanderham, he made reference in his earlier remarks about the possibility that we might be getting our butts kicked in space. I will tell you that that's a day we don't want to see happen. And we're preparing for that moment. It's important that, as we have in every other domain, whether it's land, air, sea, or cyber, we are taking the proper steps today to make sure that, again, our capabilities not only will be preserved, but that they will be resilient, and that ultimately those capabilities and effects will be able to operate through any kind of contested environment. So as I look, as we put that strategic context of framework, starting really with the 16 president's budget and then moving forward to this year, there has been a broad understanding at all levels of government, whether it's the White House and Congress, certainly within the DoD, that we've got a challenge that we've got to rise to. And I'm encouraged because there's strong agreement and understanding of the rapidly changing threat environment that we have, but also the need to do something about that, the need to act. And so our view is shared, consistent across all of DoD, and that we're working to understand and apply rapidly, as quickly as we can, opportunities to defend ourselves, capabilities to defend ourselves, and be able to, again, transform into survivable and resilient, more resilient systems and architectures. We've got to do this, though, in a deliberate fashion. Not everything, as you might imagine, just because there may be a space threat, there doesn't necessarily have to be a space-based response to those rapid threats, rapidly evolving threats. And so we're doing so in conjunction, in full conjunction, across the Joint Force Team through the DoD Space Council that's held, that brings all of our major DoD and IC players together that allow us to capture and take advantage and leverage each other's strengths and understand where our vulnerabilities might be as a nation and be able to accordingly plan and establish priorities and work together to, again, field the kind of capabilities and systems as well as make the kind of investment choices that we need. And so it was from that foundation that I thought it would be important to kind of share some of what our most important priorities that we have established here in our 17 budget and kind of give you some insights with regard to where our future architectures will be evolving as well as our future program investments. Again, I mentioned there is strong agreement on these priorities across our national security space enterprise. That is being led by Secretary James as the principal DoD space advisor in a direct report relationship with Secretary Carter. That's huge. That's a very, very important role that she fulfills, bringing in all the elements across our national security space enterprise, but as well it's important that we've got all of our partners coming together, if you will, on a common viewpoint and understanding as to what our priorities and investment choices should be. And so with that, our Air Force space budget, I'll go ahead and walk into some of our major our major mission areas and walk through some of those programs and priorities so you can kind of get a sense of what our investments are here in 17 and where we'll be going. Next chart. Our largest increase percentage-wise from the 17 budget represents about $5.5 billion of investment. The largest share has primarily gone to launch and SATCOM, and I'll be talking through each of these mission areas. First, within space launch, of course, it's kind of broken out into three segments. And let me state right up front how important assured access is. There is no space without our launch capability. There is no space, there are no space-enabled capabilities without assured access. So what we are doing in our launch enterprise is critically important for our nation. And it's important that as we work through these challenges and work to evolve to our next generation launch systems and launch capabilities, that we do so in an open, obviously transparent manner, and that we field the kinds of capabilities that have delivered the unprecedented record of success that we've all enjoyed over the last several years with regard to our launch enterprise and delivering payloads to orbit, but also to be able to field these new capabilities and deal with the rising threat environment, again, that we see. So assured access is job one. It always will be. It's critical that we get it right. As many of you know, we're in an interesting dialogue, a challenging dialogue nationally with regard to what's the best way to assure our launch capabilities. But the thing that I am most encouraged about as we examine and we continue to debate as to what our future launch capabilities and the method for getting there is that there is consistent and unified thought that we will work towards a common solution and we will be successful. And I think that's, while there's differences in opinion with regard to how we ought to be going about doing this and what our future systems, our future launch capabilities all look like, there is wide recognition and acknowledgement and support that we will make the necessary steps to, one, transition off the RD-180 engine, the Russian-made RD-180 engine, as rapidly as we possibly can, but two, make sure that, again, job one, we assure our access to space and that we deliver those systems and capabilities that we need on orbit in a rapid and timely fashion to sustain our capabilities and constellations. I mentioned that this mission area is broken out into three large elements. First being our launch capability. It's the foundation of our assured access to space. It provides the engineers, the engineering support, the skills, as well as the infrastructure that sustains our launch ranges on both coasts, both at Vandenberg Air Force Base, as well as down at Patrick Air Force Base at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. It allows us to, if you will, maintain launches of upwards of 8 national security space launches per year. Allows us the flexibility to replan and support a dynamic and ever-changing manifest, and really is the foundation of our capability to assured access and success. And so, again, about $768 million is set aside in the 17 budget for that. As well, we've got our launch services capability, which is funded for 5 launch services in 17, 3 of which will be competitive. It continues our strategy as we evolve towards a competitive approach for our national security space launch enterprise. Again, 3 of them will be competitive in 17, with all future missions beyond that intended to be competitive starting in FY18 and beyond. We're in a period of transition as we move away from if you will, the block buy, the EELV block buy program that we've had with the United Launch Alliance towards a competitive launch environment in the future. And we're working to understand, again with Congress, to understand what that transition looks like in the near term as we then continue to develop and mature our follow-on next generation launch systems and capabilities starting in FY22. Beyond that, you'll see there's a line down at the bottom for new system launch development. That continues our Air Force's strategy to develop our next generation launch systems and capabilities. It's, again, foundational to what we're trying to do for assured access to space. The first step, of course, is the need to mature our technological base, to make sure that our national industry here in the United States, that we've got the kinds of systems and capabilities to deliver these systems. Then our next step is to develop rocket propulsion system capabilities. Space and Missile Systems Center, recently awarded 4 other transaction authority agreements and has allowed them to move forward and take that step to, again, see what kinds of systems and capabilities are out there and allow us to, in a unique public-private partnership arrangement, to work with commercial industry to develop, again, to understand what kinds of systems and capabilities will be available. Not only that, but then how we might then be able to take that towards a launch system investment as part of a public-private partnership agreement, ultimately allowing the Air Force to procure launch services. And I think that's an important point collectively as we look at where we're going with launch and the debate that we have, and that the Air Force does not maintain, as we do, say, aircraft or even some of our cyber, or most of our cyber programs, we don't maintain and we don't buy engines or individual rockets. We buy launch services. And so each of those launch services are unique. Each of them carry different payloads, different upwards of 8 different national security space launch orbits. And so each of them are individually tailored. And it's important that as we procure these launch services, that we've got the appropriate capability and rocket propulsive capabilities, as well as ultimately the most importantly, a rocket that we'll be able to successfully deliver those capabilities on orbit and on time. So it's an interesting challenge. It's certainly our highest priority right now as we're working towards that end. But we believe that, again, working with Congress, that we're going to be successful in this endeavor and achieve the right solutions for the nation. Next chart. SATCOM. Afcea, certainly I would expect there to be interest here. I received some questions as I was preparing to come up on stage and talk a little bit about this. Our military satellite communications systems architecture, like our overhead persistent infrared architecture, when you look at systems like advanced EHF and MILSTAR era kinds of assured and protected communications, these are, if you will, strategically important national survival of the nation kind of capabilities. And as we are flying out our current programs of record, certainly within the advanced EHF program, we've, again, consistent with the rising threat environment, it's important to acknowledge, and certainly those who wish to do us harm, recognize that there are some critical capabilities that these systems provide. And they represent, in some cases, attractive targets for those who might wish to do us harm. And so, as part of our extended discussion on resiliency, we're looking at ways that we might better be able to ensure survivability of these systems, resiliency of these systems, and ultimately an ability to field more capability in a more rapid fashion. The advanced EHF system was a mid-90s era design. It's now 20 years old, similarly with our OPIR systems, the SBIRS program. And so as we look at that, we're trying to have a conversation that says, hey, what's the best way to not only provide the protected communication systems that our warfighter needs, but how do we evolve and how do we potentially disaggregate and or ensure the resiliency of these systems moving forward? Again, we believe that we're going to be able to take full advantage of not only the current as well as the rapidly evolving technological base within industrial base within our commercial sector. And so we're in the process of doing two things. One, we've completed the Protected SATCOM Communication Systems AOA, the analysis of alternatives. That has been completed. It's now within CAPE, completing its sufficiency review, targeting to be delivered to Congress here next month. Very, very happy about that because that really sets the foundation and the framework for our planning as we go forward and make informed choices with regard to what our investments ought to be in the follow-on systems for protected comm. But as you look to that, we're also trying to take advantage of new ways of delivering protected communications through other means, primarily whether it would be, if you will, our comms today, basically you're either at one of two extremes. You're either protected or you're completely unprotected. And certainly this audience knows that a lot, if not most or all of our, or I should say most of our communication systems are currently being provided via unprotected means. And so it's important that we provide capability in between the two. And that is certainly the intent of our protected tactical waveform development as well as our protected tactical service field demonstration. Two efforts that we're very proud of. We feel like that we're making right, informed choices there as we continue to try to not only develop the waveform but the crypto to enable that and then be able to develop and deliver that through whether it's on the current WGS satellite constellation as well as through commercial capabilities. That's a conversation that, frankly, as we evolve our architectures and you look across the resiliency spectrum, we believe that there's a great chance there for force mix. And we've got to understand that better. Hey, how much truly nationally critical strategic comm requirements do I have? Do I need to have on systems like advanced EHF in the future? And how much comm do I need to have that's, that would require certainly some additional level of protection or secure communications that simply would be better than today's non-secure environment? And that's a force mix, again, discussion that we're currently working through, trying to understand what that requirement set looks like. and then, of course, we'll be able to adjust our budgets accordingly. But we believe that these seed corn investments that we're having in our protected tactical waveform, in the protected tactical enterprise service field demonstration, are critically important to help shaping that discussion and being able to provide viable alternatives, if you will, to be able to provide those protected communications that our warfighters urgently need. As well, for wideband comm, this is the year, in many in the space and the comm world like to say this is the year of wideband, in that we're following up that protected, the Piscus AOA with the wideband AOA, kicking off. It will be led by Headquarters Air Force Space Command in conjunction with corresponding support out of the headquarters. Again, another critically important domain as part of a larger construct and conversation, as I mentioned earlier, the need to understand, all right, what can we do and how much asset need to be apportioned for strategic comm, and then what's the force mix options of what is the trade space, as well as what can industry bring. We recognize that there are a lot of divergent capabilities out there across industry that we frankly want to be able to take advantage of. And there's a lot of different business models out there. And so we're trying to understand what those capabilities are first, and then be able to, once we understand what through this AOA that will be conducted, and then beyond that, then take the next steps in our investment choices. And I think really exploring what kind of commercial services, which is yet another opportunity here, in that we may not necessarily be buying dedicated government resources to perform this mission. A lot of this, as we do today, we lease. We're leasing a great amount of our current communications capabilities. We believe that there's an opportunity to continue that relationship, albeit in a more affordable and effective manner in the future. And so I think that AOA is going to shape a lot of that discussion here in the next few months, and certainly we intend to look and work with industry to help shape that discussion, understand the trade spaces, and then lay out acquisition strategies accordingly. Finally, the budget also supports continued investment and support of our Pathfinder series, which has been a very, very successful endeavor for us as we've looked for different ways of, again, acquiring transponded communications or wideband communication capabilities, and understanding what the trade space is for each of those capabilities. It's something that we feel good about that, again, is going to continue to form our trade space and then being able to move forward in all our follow-on architectures. Next chart gets into a little bit about position and navigation and timing. GPS is an incredible capability that we're very proud of, obviously provided free of charge by the United States Air Force. It's a service that is frankly known and provided throughout the world. It continues to be the gold standard across the globe for precision and capabilities and timing. But as we look at the future of that architecture, we recognize that, again, that there are opportunities to continue to grow and evolve our systems. We're moving forward and delivering, or matter of fact, we're readying. We're completing our first of the GPS-3 satellites. The first space vehicle has completed its thermal vacuum testing. Very pleased with the progress that we're continuing to see there. As it readies itself and make its available for launch date later on this summer, we'll see the subsequent satellites continue in a similar fashion, making their way through the development test environment. But the follow-on program will really look at probably the vehicles 11 and beyond, and look to really get to a digital or navigation payload. We think that's important as we continue to see the rising threats and those who wish to jam those signals, those who wish to deny our warfighting operators and challenged regimes. And so we believe that it's important that we take the time to understand, again, what industry capabilities are out there and how can we best field those capabilities at a more effective price. We're currently conducting a production feasibility assessment potentially to look at a production competition for this. We've had a strong response in terms of an RFP that was released earlier this year, and that assessment will go on here through the summer as we look for ways to continue to improve our GPS-3 capabilities. As well, the other two elements, of course, are our user equipment segment, the mobile ground user equipment, MGUI, as well as our operational command and control capability, our OCX. First with MGUI, it's all about, we can have all the signals in space that we want to. They don't mean anything unless we deliver capability to our users, our warfighters, and certainly global users who depend upon, matter of fact, the application that guided me here successfully to the convention center this morning. But as we continue to refine and improve the strength as well as the accuracy of our signal, it's important that our user equipment be able to take advantage of the military code application that we're fielding to be able to assure our PNT capabilities in challenged and denied environments, as well as that user equipment be fielded in a rapid and expeditious manner. And so that's what the funding line that is shown there is really trying to transition to that next increment of capability that will support M-code utilization and integration, and then obviously beyond that get into our next increment of user equipment, which will continue to provide new systems and new capabilities to be able to take advantage of our M-code capabilities. Finally, in our ground control segment, the OCX program, for those that are tracking the OCX program, it's certainly seen its share of struggles and development challenges. We believe in coordination and support with Raytheon that we're working towards systems that will ultimately provide the world's most hardened cyber capability as we field this critical capability. It's important that we get this right. The world knows how critical GPS is, and it's important that that we have the most hardened information assurance protocols in place on our GPS command and control capabilities, just due to the criticality of this system around the world. And so we're working with Raytheon to make sure that we get this right, that we field this critical capability as quickly as we possibly can, because frankly our M-code capabilities, our M-code satellite constellations are dependent upon it. But we're going to make sure that, again, we get it right and that we get it fielded as quickly as we possibly can. Next, moving into overhead persistent infrared. The SBIRS program and the legacy DSP capabilities really provide an unblinking eye. They allow us all to sleep soundly at night, knowing that there are systems and capabilities that provide that warning of ballistic missile attack and allow us to take action to negate those threats should they ever surface. Our 17 budget continues the strong investment and certainly program performance that the SBIRS program is delivering today. That we're getting ready to launch later this summer, the third geosynchronous satellite to orbit, continuing to build out the objective SBIRS system. And the 17 budget beyond that supports checkout of the third and fourth geosynchronous satellites that will be delivered here over the next couple of years, as well as funding and if you will, capability for our Block 10 and ultimately satisfaction of the full capability for our ground command and control capabilities. Very pleased with the continued progress that our SBIRS ground program has made. We're now able to, if you will, bring together all of our capabilities for the SBIRS and DSP all into one operations floor at Buckley Air Force Base in Colorado, which was a huge step allowing consolidation of all those capabilities into the operations floor at Buckley, which was critical to what we're trying to do as we move the SBIRS program forward and be able to have that common fused sight picture of the overhead persistent infrared vantage point that only those systems and programs can deliver. It's really being enabled, though, through, again, another seed corn investment like our protected satellite communications investments are, through our space modernization initiatives. In that, similar, again, to advanced EHF, SBIRS is also trying to take advantage of appropriate risk reduction and tech maturation investments, allowing us to understand, again, just as advanced EHF represents a potential vulnerability and potential target for our adversaries, SBIRS does the same, and we recognize that. And so we're exploring ways through prudent investment to be able to understand how we might better protect ourselves in case of some kind of attack, and or how might we potentially disaggregate and or continue to improve the performance and capabilities that we're seeing on orbit. And so I think that's an important aspect foundationally as part of our plans going forward. SBIRS, like advanced EHF and our protected SATCOM AOA, the OPIR analysis of alternatives completed in December as well. And that sufficiency review was completed by CAPE here in in February. And we recently just delivered the final report to Congress. A big win for the Air Force in that it allows us now and the staff at Headquarters Air Force Space Command to be able to make recommendations to General Hyten to be able to move forward and with deliberate planning to start our next acquisition investments and really focus on what that next generation architecture will look like. And that's the exact same approach that we're taking, again, with protected SATCOM. And so while seemingly taking too long, it's important that we do this planning right. It's important that we take the time to understand, just due to the critical natures that these systems and capabilities provide, and that we move so in coordination with industry to understand the full range of capabilities and effects that might be able to be provided through these systems, and then make our investment choices in an appropriate way. And so, again, the only other aspect that I would add there is that we continue to find new ways to exploit the data that's coming off of these systems. And it's an exciting time because the SBIRS program, with its increased sensitivity, is revealing a whole new set of patterns of life and interesting events that allow us to be able to detect, observe, and take appropriate actions and measures to be able to advise tactical commanders and those who need to make rapid decisions to be able to translate and disseminate that information in a very rapid manner and inform our fielded forces. Again, great capability that we're very proud of. Of course, our final area is really space control. As I mentioned, with regard to the importance of space launch and assured access to space, it's equally important that as a now contested domain, that we understand and be able to see and understand and prosecute understanding and awareness of that domain through space situational awareness. We've got to be able to see our operational environment. I mean, any warfighter in any domain will be able to tell you that point blank, in that we've got to be able to see any threats that might be coming our way, to be able to make timely and accurate decisions in tactically relevant timelines, to be able to if we see threats continuing to grow and or should one of our assets be threatened, that we be able to take appropriate measures to defend ourselves. And so that's why it's so critically important that we get it right within the various sensors that we are fielding, and not only our legacy systems, but then our plans for the future with regard to our investment choices that we're making to be able to see and understand our operational environment. It's foundationally supported by, so first is our investment in the space fence that's shown on the lower portion of the chart. That program continues to go very well, in that it's going to provide a whole new way of ability to detect and track and understand any threats that might be particularly emerging in our low Earth orbit. We're anxious and looking forward to seeing its performance as it comes online here in 2019, because we believe that, again, we're currently tracking about 23,000 objects in space out at the Joint Space Operations Center at Vandenberg. We believe that when the space fence becomes operational here in 19, that number will grow tenfold, that upwards of 250,000 new objects will be able to be detected. Again, that's the kind of capability that we need to be able to see, track, and get into our OODA loop planning and decision making that will allow us, again, to understand and make sure that any objects that may be approaching any of our critical assets don't have hostile threat or intent. A couple of additional new investments, new starts, as part of our integrated architecture. First, the deep space advanced radar concept. Again, we're looking through, there's a force mix discussion going on in this mission area as well. Certainly having advanced radar capability in addition to our current electro-optical capabilities as well as other radars, having yet even more advanced radars, particularly to be able to see and understand what's going on at geosynchronous orbit, is critically important. And so this, again, is some seed corn investment. It's a concept study, but we believe is prudent to, again, help us to be able to understand and characterize and track objects that might have nefarious intent. Of course, another important aspect that through General Hyten's leadership as well as Deputy Secretary of Defense work really laid down a call to arms last year at the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs with an emphasis on developing a coordinated national security space, if you will, mindset across both DoD and the intelligence community that we might be able to respond and coordinate our plans and our actions together in an integrated environment. And so that's exactly what is going on at the JIC-SPOC, yet one more space acronym. It's, you know, the Joint Interagency Combined Space Operations Center. It represents another new start, albeit at a small level. It is very, very important in that the initial steps as we've stood it up here over the last year is initially to do some of the important things that General Vanderham talked about earlier, in that it's important as a growing and trying to understand our capabilities and again, that threat environment, that we understand what our tactics, techniques, and procedures ought to be. How do we talk to one another? How do we coordinate? I mean, you would think that, hey, we do that well. We don't, but we're working on it. And it's, again, you know, developing and understanding those kinds of ops checklists, those crew coordination kinds of activities, as well as some important concept work and experimentation work, allows us to better coordinate our activities together and make tactically relevant decisions in a much more coordinated and integrated fashion. So very, very important that we continue that work going forward because we're seeing the benefits of it paying off in spades already. As well, on the next chart, we need to be able to bring in this vast, you know, our operating domain is 73 trillion cubic miles. And when you consider space and all the challenges beyond that are out there in that operating environment, trying to integrate that into a single site picture is a very, very demanding task. And it's so important that we bring that site picture in and be able to process that information again in a rapid fashion. And so that's exactly what the JSPOC mission system is intended to do. It's intended to bring us into a modern computing environment that will allow us to, you know, understand again, and prosecute and disseminate information to tactical warfighters so that, you know, timely action can be taken. But we can't get there if I can't have an integrated view of the battlefield, or if you of this operating space. And so it is foundational to what we're trying to do going forward as we continue to evolve and understand the space environment. Finally, we've got appropriate investment in our counter space capabilities, our counter communication system. It's important that you know that we have the ability to defend ourselves. That when our assets, if they are ever challenged, that the U.S. and certainly we're not looking for a fight in space. That would be a sad, sad day if you know. You just think of the implications of that might happen. And anybody see? You know, the movie that, you know, when you got the debris challenges that might be out there, and it just pollutes the environment for decades, even hundreds of years, if we're talking about a kinetic war in space. And so it's very, very important that we understand those effects and that we have responsible norms of behavior. And so while we're not looking for a fight in space, it is important, it's critically important that we be able to defend ourselves appropriately if ever challenged. Finally, on the horizon, looking forward to both near term here, there's a number of efforts that I referred to during the discussion here of actions that are concluding here this summer again, I think that are foundationally important to what we're doing. I talked about the Protected Satellite Communication AOA report. We're going to get that delivered. The intent there is to see investment choices and our future architectural decisions made, and if you will, what does our 18 budget look like? What will our 18 POM look like for both Protected SATCOM as well as SBIRS? Two big decisions. But nonetheless, Secretary Kendall, as well as the entire department leadership, Secretary James, are focused on this as priorities to get those AOAs completed and then set the corresponding foundational investment choices in place and be able to make decisions and move forward with those programs. I talked about the importance of the Protected Tactical Service Field Demonstration. We're moving forward with that contract award here this summer. Another one is moving forward with our plans for our weather system follow-on. Sorry for the acronym there, but WSF stands for Weather System Follow-on, in that we're moving forward with an acquisition strategy with an intent to primarily focus on our two validated requirements out of the JROC, out of the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, in that we're trying to understand if you will, the gaps that we currently have are associated with ocean surface vector winds and tropical cyclone intensity, and as well as energetic charged particles, particularly in low Earth orbit. Those three mission areas are gaps in our weather program, are areas that we're focused on today as we continue to now take that next step and plan objective systems for our follow-on programs. I talked a little bit about the GPS production feasibility assessment. That's certainly going to set us up for success as we develop formal acquisition strategies in 2018. And then as well, we're continuing to move forward with launches, as I mentioned, both in SBIRS as well as WGS. Beyond that, I do believe that there are a number of emerging opportunities that we need industry's help with. Of course, we could not be as successful as we are in space and field the great capabilities and systems that we have without industry's support. Thank you. Your partnership, your support is critically important to us as a nation, and we have great respect for the systems and capabilities that our industry partners bring to the table, and the commitment and the teamwork that we enjoy in our relationship. That said, we believe that there are opportunities as we continue to look for the future. Certainly part of this is our Enterprise Ground Service Initiative that General Hyten has kicked off. If you will, the need to standardize the way that our space operators command and control, if you will, conduct telemetry tracking and control of our space assets, if you will, a common understanding, a common platform, if you will, with embedded services that are unique to the individual capabilities. That's a vision that General Hyten and the team out at the Space and Missile Systems Center continue to work aggressively on. It's not a new start. It will not be, at least is not intended to be a new program, a standalone program, but it's part of an initiative to be able to consolidate and standardize a lot of our ground systems and our ground service capabilities. I talked before, but boy, there's gold in them hills when you talk OPIR, and there are opportunities for data exploitation. There is just an immense amount of information and data that continues to be available, and being able to plug into those sensors and capabilities that are coming off of our assets on orbit and be able to exploit that data and be able to, again, inform the appropriate users and customers of that information is just absolutely critical. And so I look at that as a real opportunity for continued exploitation and work. I've talked about the weather system follow-on as well, the space-based surveillance system follow-on. is another effort that we're moving forward on as we get ready to release the RFP. Our current capability was fielded back in the 2011 time frame with a 7-year design life, 2010, 2011 year time frame. And so it's rapidly approaching its, our current SBSS system is, and it's reaching its end of life. And so we're laying in plans for our follow-on system and looking forward. Again, it's part of an important force mix as part of our need to understand our space situational awareness. And so that's another important area. I've talked about the critical importance of protected tactical comm. Really, guys, and I know most of our industry participants here have been well informed and participating regularly as part of that discussion. I encourage you to continue to do that. Mr. Winston Beauchamp out of the SAF SP, if you will, he is the deputy, or he is the Secretary James Director for the space staff there on the air staff. He and his team are heavily involved in leading the discussion, the enterprise discussion across our communication architectures as we lay in foundational plans for what those next steps are. And then, of course, working with our team out at SMC, we're going to make sure that our acquisition strategies follow suit and that we get this right. There is a big role to play for industry here. We believe that commercial capabilities are absolutely critical and will be foundational as part of our resilient communication architectures, and we encourage your continued active participation. Similar to my comment on SBIRS, I would just note that as part of our integrated battlefield, or if you will, the battle space, the space awareness, space situational awareness environment, all source data fusion is absolutely essential to what we're trying to do too. When you look at being able to integrate all source capabilities, it really presents a different understanding of your operational environment. And so capabilities to be able to do that are critically important to where we're trying to go so that we don't have a bad day in space. We don't want that to happen. We want to be able to make sure that the United States continues to lead the way and making sure that those capabilities will always be there for any potential warfighting application in any environment. Finally, the last two capabilities, I've talked a lot about the JSPOC mission, battle space capabilities. It's real, as we look, as we have evolved, if you will, from our current system that we've used for many years as we've looked to really catalog and track our space assets. It's really evolving from more of a tracking and cataloging function into a battle management command and control capability. And that's where we've got to go in the future. And the intent there is really to first be able to get those foundational capabilities and replicate our current existing systems, and then take that next step towards a BMC2 kind of application, where I'm being able to field and integrate multiple capabilities on very, very rapidly, and be able to test those out and experiment with them, frankly, experiment with prototypes in the JSPOC, and then be able, as we see the maturity of the initial applications, and once they reach a sufficient level of maturity, be able to move them forward and field them quickly. And so we really view that as an opportunity going forward. And then finally, I've talked about it, but as we look across all of our mission areas, again, many of the ones that I've talked about here before today, or earlier today, but as we go forward, it's going to be very, very important that we understand what the force mix looks like and how can we leverage commercial services, commercial systems, and commercial capabilities as part of an overall resilient architecture for national security space. We recognize that we can't go it alone. And we recognize that it's going to take an appropriate force mix to make sure that those capabilities will be there for us, not only today, but in the future. So with that, folks, I hope that this has been informative for you in terms of giving you a little bit of a peek at what our current plans are, what our current programs are, but also to kind of give you a sense in light of the evolving and changing strategic landscape, to give you a sense that we are determined to make the appropriate adjustments that we need to assure our space capabilities now and in the future. It's an exciting time to be in the space business. We certainly don't lack for things to do, but we know and certainly recognize that it's through that partnership that we enjoy with industry and certainly our partners in academia as well, that we will be able to continue to field and maintain these critical space capabilities well into the future. So I thank you all for being here. I know having a space guy at Afcea wasn't necessarily, may not have been what would be the typical presentation here, but I think it's critically important. The kinds of systems and capabilities that space and cyber bring to the fight, you know, boy, it sure helps us leverage each other across the integrated domain, as General Vanderham mentioned. You know, we're really looking, it's no longer an air, space, and cyber-centric operational view. It's one team, one fight. And we've got to be able to leverage the synergistic effects across all of those capabilities and you know, be able to rapidly choose the appropriate force mix as we deal with any number of different threats that we're seeing across the globe. But again, folks, it is a real pleasure to be here this morning, and I think we do have time for a few questions.
Thank you, sir. We do have time for one question. Could you describe how you handle or incorporate near-space capabilities, such as long-dwell air platforms, in the overall mix of investments to meet space mission needs?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the first part of the question.
Could you describe how you handle or incorporate near-space capabilities, such as long-dwell air platforms, in the overall mix of investments to meet space mission needs?
Yeah, thank you. A great question, and I appreciate that. And certainly, I think for those that have, General Holmes would certainly have some comments here. But it is part of our overall planning construct that occurs at the Air Staff. That's led by General Holmes as part of the strategic planning choices, and as you develop and deliver what is, again, those force mix options look like. It's no longer just one domain. Hey, I've got to look at this, I've got to have this capability in space and then this one in air. I mean, frankly, those lines are blurring now. And it's important that we recognize that, again, the focus is about delivering the effects or delivering the capability to the warfighter on the ground. And where that data or where that information or where that capability comes from, frankly, is irrelevant. I mean, it's not about just, hey, I've got to have this many because it's a space system or this many because it's an air system. It's frankly, what system, what choice do we have as part of that planning choices process allows us to deliver the kind of capabilities when it's needed. And so part of that is an active conversation that goes on each year as part of our strategic planning choices dialogue that allows us to lay in the appropriate plans that we need to as an Air Force to understand what those force mix trades ought to be, and again, laying in those future programs that are going to deliver the capabilities when they're needed.
Thank you, General Teague.
Great.
At this time, please welcome Mike Warlick back to the stage to formally thank him on behalf of Afcea and our audience for his presentation today.
Thanks, Mike.